My name is Eddie. I live in a small farmhouse in New South Wales, though I will not disclose my exact location. I guess I can't exactly say I live there anymore. I don't know who in their right mind would be living there after what I've seen. So, I suppose I should say I lived there for a very brief period. You see, my Uncle Reggie passed away last month, and having no children of his own, he left the farmhouse to me. They found Uncle Reggie lying face down in the front of the sink, dead from a heart attack. Now, Uncle Reggie was a strange sort. My parents never talked about him, and he never visited. He just kept to himself, up there in his house, all alone. No wife, no girlfriend, no pets, just him and his wheat field. I don't even know why he bought that place, my father said the morning after we heard Reggie had passed on. He never does anything with it. Wonder why he left it to you. Regardless of why Uncle Reggie decided to leave his house to me, I was absolutely delighted. It was little more than a shack with 4 rooms and a bathroom. But I was 18, and it was a house that I would have ownership of. So to me, this was a palace. I moved in there only 2 weeks ago on Monday. I took a week's worth of holidays at work and drove out to my uncle's house that morning. The outside of this house was, as you might expect from an aging grump who kept to himself. The wood siding was almost completely devoid of paint, with a couple of flecks of white left. The front of the house, that had a good-sized porch, though the wood banister that ran from the stairs and wrapped around the porch, that was broken. So I decided that my first act of home renovation would be completely removing it. Once inside the house though, Jesus Christ. If someone showed me a picture of the outside of this house and then showed me one on the inside and told me that this was the same place, I would call them a raving lunatic. Apparently, Uncle Reggie cared very much about his inside living conditions, despite seemingly not caring at all that the outside of his home looked like Chateau de Vincent Price. The entire home, it was fully furnished, which was the first plus because it meant I was not going to have to move much of my own stuff in at all. But I can't even describe how clean that house was. I couldn't find a speck of dust, not in the entire place. I thought I was going to spend the entire day cleaning out trash, but this was definitely a welcome surprise. I walked through every room in the house, which didn't take long, until I came to the kitchen. My eyes were immediately drawn to the kitchen window that sat just above the sink. And through the window, staring in at me, was the ugliest scarecrow that I had ever seen. It made me jump when I saw it, and I cursed out loud to no one in particular as I fell back against the wall behind me. My heart, it thumped in my chest, but as soon as I caught my breath, I stepped closer to the window to get a better look at the thing. The scarecrow's head was made out of straw and a sack of burlap. Like any other, I suppose. But it was the metal plate attached to the burlap that gave it its face. For its eyes, 2 holes equal in size were cut into the metal, and within those holes sat stones with elaborate symbols carved into them. The metal plate, it contoured around the head of straw, and it had symbols similar to the ones on its eyes, drawn in what I assumed to be red paint, all along its edge. I looked beyond the scarecrow to the wheat field that lay behind it. The wheat crop was high and stretched on for kilometres on end. Wind gently blew through the field, giving the impression of something moving about out there. I then drew my attention back to the scarecrow. "You'll be one of the first things to go," I said out loud, as if it could hear me. Soon after that, I went to work tearing apart the porch banister, which came apart very easily. I took all the pieces of lumber from the banister and threw them down in a pile on an open area of the rather big yard a good distance from the house and field. I then walked around the house to where I knew the scarecrow stood. I untied the rope that tied the scarecrow's arms and legs to the iron cross sticking out of the ground only a mere 2 feet from the house. I then carried the scarecrow, which seemed unnaturally heavy, around to the burn pile. I went and grabbed the petrol can and doused the scarecrow and all in fuel. I lit a match and I threw it on the pile and watched it all go up in flames. I kept an eye on that fire for a minute to make certain it wasn't going to spread anywhere, and then jumped in my ute and headed back into town to grab some more paint. I was back at the house about a half hour later. The flames of the fire had nearly died out, and I could see that all that was left of the scarecrow was the metal plate that was once its face. Good, I thought, as I prepared myself for a long day of painting. I went straight to work, painting the entire house. It actually didn't take long at all. Given the size of the house though, I guess that's not a huge surprise. This wasn't the first house I've painted either, so I knew I'd probably have to go over it again in the morning. After I lost daylight, I began working on moving in small stuff from my ute, my TV and game systems and the like. It was about 9 o'clock when I stopped working for the night. I settled in at the kitchen table, listening to the radio and eating some beans that I heated up on the stove. I was about to get up and put my bowl in the sink when I saw it. The scarecrow. It was back in the window. It was back. Or at least, that's what I thought, at first. There was definitely a shape in the window. I could make out its head, but nothing else. I sat there, frozen in silence for several minutes, unsure of exactly what to do. I could see slight movement, the slow shift as whoever was outside my window breathed. Finally, I called out, "Who's out there?" The figure then darted from my sight. I ran quickly to the front door, which, aside from the windows, was the only entrance into the house. I ran to the door and turned the deadbolt. I then knelt down to my tucker bag, which I left lying next to my boots near the door, and I pulled out my hunting knife. That's when the sound of heavy rain came. I waited there, sitting on my couch in the living room, waiting for whoever was outside my home to try to break in. I had my phone at the ready to call anyone if I really needed to, but I didn't want to have to do that. Call me silly, but calling the police to handle something was just not something I ever wanted to do if I can help it. So, I waited. The sound of rain, it pounded against the roof and walls of my home. I was pissed about it ruining a good day's worth of paint, but I knew it wouldn't take long to redo. I thought about getting up and going to the window to look out, see how bad the rain really was. But I thought better of it. If that guy was still out there, I didn't want him seeing where I was. The rain is a soothing sound though, and eventually, sitting on that comfy leather couch, I drifted off to sleep. I woke up in the early hours of the morning with a start. My hand was still grasping the handle of my knife firmly. I stood up and looked around the house. Door still closed and locked. All windows still in one piece. Good. No break-in. I walked out the front door of my home to see what kind of damage the rain did to the yard. The night before sounded like bloody Katrina, so I was sure the yard would be flooded. I stepped out into the sun-drenched porch, and I was shocked to find no water anywhere at all. The porch was dry as a bone, and the yard didn't seem to be wet at all. I walked down the stairs of the porch onto the yard and knelt down, putting a hand out to feel the grass. Not even a bit damp. I scratched my head, stood up and turned back to the house. When I saw what was on the house, I ran straight to my ute, threw my keys in the ignition, and drove the hell off that property as quickly as I could. There, in the still wet paint that covered the house, were thousands of handprints. I'm sitting at my parents' house in my old room, and I pull out my phone to call my mum or dad, both of whom are at work. My plan was to explain to them that instead of moving, I just wanted to sell the house. But I see I have a voicemail on my phone, so I started up and listened to it. It's my uncle's lawyer, the one who carried out his will.
Hey, Eddie. How are you, mate? Hey, sorry to bother you, but I forgot to tell you something your uncle wrote in his will. Yeah, he mentioned that I should tell you not to disturb a guardian or something. He said if you do, they will come for you. They won't stop till you're dead. Crazy bugger. Anyway, it's me job to pass on all the info, so there you go. You take care, bruv.
The phone fell from my hands, and I was unable to speak, as once again came the sound of heavy rain.
I recently took a trip to the Victorian High Country in southeastern Australia. It's one of the most popular skiing locations in the whole country, and it's very beautiful, albeit very, very cold. As I'm writing this, it is 1 degree Celsius outside. That's the highest temperature I've gotten so far. But all has been not well. I came here with my father, and it is my birthday very soon. We live on the mid-coast of New South Wales, so it's usually very hot and never cold. This was a change, obviously, but a welcome one. It all started last night with the moaning. We stay in luxury cabins, which are typically 2 or 3 stories. I took the top floor because my dad didn't want to walk up 2 flights of stairs to get out of bed. I like the view, however, as it looks directly into the plain, next to the village with another view of the valley. I was relaxing on the 3rd floor balcony. I heard a faint moan from the woods. I'm young and able, so my first instinct was to grab our torch and run downstairs. Keep in mind there are no streetlights, lamps, or any illumination at night. Plus it gets dark around 5:30 p.m. in the winter. When it gets dark around here, it gets dark. The nearest big city is Albury-Wodonga. which is an odd 150 kilometers away from here. Anyway, I ran downstairs, expecting an elderly person suffering in the -5 degrees temperature. It was freezing. Even with 6 layers on, I could feel the cold seeping in. I got to the forest's edge, and the moaning turned to wailing. I panicked and ran to help. However, it didn't sound like an old person. It sounded old, but more than old. Ancient, malicious. But it was so stressful hearing someone wailing and not doing anything. So I ran in. I approached the noise, but as I got closer, wailing turned to violent screaming. It was as if someone had poked a stick violently into a large dog's body and continued going deeper. It was horrifying. That was when it struck me that whatever it was wasn't human. I was about to let nature run its course and let the wild animal die in the cold, as it probably would die of hypothermia before whatever was hurting it did. Then it went silent. I thought that it had finally died, and there was no reason for me to be here any longer. And as I turned away, it spoke. What it said chilled me to the bone and will haunt me forever.
You are a child of the inhabitants. Yes.
It was an innocent question, yet it was filled with the hatred of an ancient destructive being. I was so scared I felt the trickle of liquid run down my leg, but I was too scared to move. I was paralyzed, but not scared anymore. The fear melted away. It felt as if I was talking to a school bully that I didn't like, but knew they meant no harm. It was peaceful. I asked what it meant.
Your ancestors inhabited my land.
I was confused, but after a few seconds I pieced it together. I have many Aboriginal ancestors in my bloodline, one of which was taken from what is now known as Mount Hotham to Beagle Bay Camp in Western Australia. Her name was Mary, and she was a victim of the stolen generation. However, she was let out when she was only 11 and completely vanished off the face of the earth until she turned 18. Then she had my great-grandmother, who in turn had children which led to my mother. I simply said to whatever malicious force was in front or behind me, "Mary? You know Mary?" It replied, almost nostalgically,
I never knew her name. The white men called her Mary, but she didn't like it. I helped her and her tribe through many winters, killing attempted settlers and bringing their bodies to them for rituals, and sometimes, in our darkest hours, food.
The fear returned. This creature was clearly not human. It had malicious intentions and was tormenting me. Well, kind of. I was hanging off every word. Like I was listening to my great-grandmother's stories of the high country. "What is your name?" I asked. Deep down I remembered a story my great-grandmother had told me. It was the story of a cannibalistic creature which preyed on enemies of the tribes in that area. It first helped with the food for the tribes, acting as a hunter, but when the white men came, it turned to those. It was an ancient being, probably millions of years old. My grandmother never told me what its intentions were with the tribe. It seemed to me like it was simply a helper.
I have no name. I never have. But your tribe called me Yanjani.
That was it. That was the creature. I still hadn't seen it, but something told me I didn't want to. "Do you want to hurt me?" I asked, hoping for a yes so I could run away as fast as I could.
No, you are a child of my friends. You are not to be harmed.
This gave me a sense of peace, but I still didn't trust it. I decided a look would be nice, just so I could see what was talking to me. I was so horribly wrong. The Yanjani was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. It was around 12 feet tall with 3 long spindly arms spread out across its thin, lanky body. I could see right through it, yet it was still a solid shape. I didn't understand, so I ran.
We will meet again soon, friend. I will do the same for you, as I did with your ancestors.
I ran inside crying. I checked the clock, expecting it to say something in the AMs, but it didn't. It was still only 10:44 p.m. My front door was wide open, my footsteps were there. It was the same time as when I ran out. I felt peace, but also scared and confused as to why time had not passed. The Yanjanese words have played through my mind every night since the encounter. But I'm curious to what it meant by helping me. I'm too scared to find out, but a part of me feels like I need the help. What should I do?
In central Queensland, there is a lonely, isolated stretch of highway surrounded by vast amounts of nothing. It is known as the Marlborough Stretch. Almost 400 kilometres of road, split up only twice by towns so small that if you blink, you're gonna miss them. Travelling on this stretch, there are signs advising to stop frequently to rest, and signs indicating a driver fatigue zone. These signs are there due to the high amount of fatal car accidents along this stretch. Driving through during the day, it provides a boring and repetitive sight. However, after the sun goes down, the Marlborough Stretch becomes something more than just walls of trees surrounding a lonely highway. For the people living either side of the Marlborough Stretch, there are rumours and legends regarding the mysterious highway and what goes on after the sun goes down and the stars come out. The sun appears as if it is setting earlier in the day to people driving through, and once it is dark, the stars are your only light. There are no lights on the horizon, and if you look up, you will see no planes. The sky is so clear and untouched, you will feel as if you can see to the other side of the universe. If you speak to any of the locals in towns surrounding the stretch, they will advise you, if driving at night, to never stop. They will say to you, keep going, don't slow down, and do not ever look back. There are stories of people hitting animals, stopping to check the damage, only to find the road empty and no animal to be seen. The soft purr of their idling car, the slow crunch of dried leaves in the nearby bushes, and soft, reflecting eyes leering back from the dark void of the bush are all you will find outside. Many people have disappeared along the Marlborough Stretch. Many people have driven in, never to exit the other side, and those who have made it out, they swear never to return. Headlights appear to come towards you, only to disappear once past, and every once in a while, there will be reports of glowing balls of light bouncing above the tree lines, and some even approaching people who have stopped on the side of the road. The local people describe these mysterious lights as min-min lights from old Aboriginal stories. If you find yourself driving the Great Marlborough Stretch and you notice the sun hastily falling towards the horizon, it is advised that you do not slow down, do not stop, and do be wary of the creatures crossing the roads. It could be something more than a simple bush creature.